Is that a chill in the air? Something spoopy this way comes. Tell me, brave painter, do you believe in ghosts? Hey guys, welcome back to Planet Mithril. My name is Mithril, and yes, today I am taking a well-deserved break from painting all those good Armour heroes and warriors, and delving into the kingdom of Angmar today with my take on the new evil spirit hero that has dropped, the Shadow of Rhudar. I'm going to be trying to give my shadow a super ghostly, spectral and ethereal look, and to do this I'll be using a few different techniques that maybe I haven't used quite as much on the channel, and using a lot of turquoises, teals, blues, and some really beaten metals to really bring this character to life, well, to the afterlife on the tabletop. Now, as it is a Forge World model, it is always recommended that you bathe all the component parts in warm soapy water prior to painting. This just gets rid of any mold release grease that might still be on the model that would upset your paint job. I then assembled the shadow with super glue, and I am going to be working off a black undercoat, which I've applied with Citadel Chaos Black Spray. Can't afford to waste time here, guys. Got to get this spoopy guy done before Halloween. Brushes ready, let's get painting. His face and hands, I'm giving a base coat with a 3-to-1 mix of Ironrack Skin and Bugman's Glow. The Bugman's Glow just helps the Ironrack cover a little more consistently over the black undercoat. All the plate work, I'm now giving a base coat with a 3-to-1 mix of Iron Warriors and Castellax Bronze, a darker silver base with the bronze mixed in to inlay some initial rust and tainting of the metals. The ragged chainmail down the front and under the arms, I'm giving a base coat dry brush using Lead Belcher. All the robes now are being given a base coat with a 50-50 mix of Inky by Darkness and Abaddon Black, making sure I get all within, around and under all the areas of material and don't end up with any unbased patches. I want to get a really spectry, ghostly hue to my Shadow of Rhudar skin, similar to that of the Dead Marsh Spectres. To begin with, I'm applying an overbrush to all the skin with a rough 4-to-1 mix of Ironrack Skin and Inky by Darkness. Keeping this slightly thinner means that the lighter base coat will hopefully show through underneath, giving an initial highlight to the upper, more gaunt features of his face and hands. The skin is now getting a second shading stage, this time with Drakenhof Nightshade, diluted significantly with Lamia Medium, just targeting this more into the recesses. Now you can probably see the basic structure of the shadow's face and hands really starting to show through, just with the Ironrack base, showing through the more translucent layer over the top. It's done a lot of the work for me already, and has given me a really effective guide for the following layering and highlight stages. For the next few stages, I'm adding Deepkin Flesh into the previous mix and using the lighter areas as my guide, applying this as layers, further defining the sharpness and gauntness of the face and hand. The face might be challenging, as it's never easy to paint within a helmet, but the hands have very prominent bony knuckles and tendons, which will take this layer really well. Continuing to build up the concentration of Deepkin Flesh in the mix until I reach the final highlight stage, where I'm using pure Deepkin Flesh just to pick out the razor sharp and most prominent features of his extremely gaunt skeletal structure. Tips of the knuckle joints, cheekbones and jawline most notably. Now I'm happy with how my Spectral Skin is looking. I'm applying a shade with heavily diluted Croak Green just to reinforce a slightly more ethereal, sickly look to the shadow. The eye recesses I'm carefully picking up using Abaddon Black. And this time I'm painting in the glowing ethereal eyes using Dawn Yellow, not Pallid Witch Flesh. His manky teeth and nails I'm very carefully painting in now using Rakarth Flesh. Then picking out the individual teeth and highlighting using Screaming Skull. With his spectral features in place, I'm going to be working on the armour and filigree next. Now for my Shadow of Rhudar, I really want to accentuate the rusted, ill-cooked, oxidised old feel to this model. He'd been dead a long time. To begin with, I'm staining all the silver areas now with Agrak Surfshade. Now I'm not diluting this and applying it too thickly, as I don't want an actual shade here. The brown tone of the Agrak staining will bounce off the bronzy tones already in place from the Castellex in the base coat. Now I'm toning down all the silvers with a thorough all-over shade using diluted with a 1:1 shade of Nuln Oil and Lamy Medium, working this into all the armour grooves and weathered holes. Now look at that armour, a beautifully tarnished and rusted look, which is exactly what I wanted. Now I'm going to be using very bright metallics for the upper level highlights, applied in a very precise and sharp manner. This will contrast with the darker tones, and the sharper I can make them, the more malevolent and evil the shadow's armour will look. Using Ironbreaker now, I'm going to apply a layer to all the silver metalworks. With this, I'm carefully tracing the upper edges and sharpest points of metals, whilst also carefully framing all the blemishes and holes. The chainmail at this stage is also just getting a quick dusting with Ironbreaker just to lift it back up in line with the rest of the armour. All the gold areas I'm picking out carefully now using Castellex Bronze. This includes the ribbing down the front of the armour, the hilt of the sword and the crown that sits on the top of the helmet. The golds now are getting a similar staining treatment, much like the silvers did, this time however using Druchii Violet. Being very careful not to bleed out onto the silvers, but it's not the end of the world if you do. I'm now layering over all the golds using full Urite Copper. I'm keeping the lower layers of the gold ever so slightly warmer than the silvers. This will create a really effective contrast, and when I'm done, will tie in with the silvers really well, thanks to the weathering. The upper highlights and sharpest edges now I'm defining with a slightly more desaturated tone, adding padded witch flesh into the fulgurite copper, which will just take the intensity out of the gold and make it a little more faded and aged, which is ideal. You can add as much or as little as you want here, but I'd advise caution if you do go for a heavier concentration, as you want to avoid this becoming yellow or beige rather than gold. Now for the fun part. I'm going to be weathering the silvers and gold using Nyaluck Oxide. I'm concentrating this in the grooves between the platework and the gold trims, the holes in and around all the metals, and blending it in slightly with Lamy and Medium just to further reinforce that aged and rotten look. Try not to be too heavy-handed with this, as the last thing you want is a dried pool of technical paint spoiling the overall aesthetic. Remember to go slow, and you can always add more if you need. I'm applying an initial layer, now using pure Inky by Darkness, and applying this as a blocking layer, separating out the very well defined folds and areas of the flowing robes, trying my best to leave the base coat showing in as many of the recesses as I can. Now, as I said, I want to give my Shadow of Rhudar a very otherworldly, really malevolent and ethereal, ghostly look. To do this, I'm going to be shading slightly differently to usual and applying a heavily diluted shade using Sybarite Green. This is very bright and luminescent, and by manoeuvring it into the recesses as best I can and keeping it really thin down, once it dries, and as long as there's no pooling errors, the recesses of the robes will glow with a sickly green, which will really complement the overall look of the model. Now yes, the robes do look quite a bit messy, patchy and streaky due to the light wash over the dark robes. Don't fret, the layers and highlights are going to fix this. To begin layering up the Shadow's robes, I'm applying a 1-to-1 mix of Inky by Darkness and Sotek Green, again using those turquoise tones to complement the greens and blues that run throughout from the base coat, and blending in with the rest of the model. Focusing again on blocking out the more prominent folds of material, letting the flow of the sculpt guide the brush as best as I can. I'm continuing to build up the feel and flow of the robes by applying a second layer, this time using pure Sotek Green. As you can see, I'm trying to leave the previous stages showing underneath and blend my paints from the darker, more shadowy parts through to the lighter, more prominent ridges. I'm starting to build up the upper highlights now by adding in Krieg Khaki to the Sotek I used for the previous stage. As you can see, the Krieg Khaki has a slightly greeny yellowy hue to it, which will really complement the turquoise tones of the Sotek and give me a super lovely blended, striking look to my robes. I'm continuing to build these highlights up by adding small amounts more Krieg Khaki until I'm ready for the final highlight stage. For the final few edge highlights, I'm adding in padded witch flesh to the mix and carefully, and most importantly, precisely, just defining the upper areas of all the material folds and framing the edges of all the cloth. At this stage also, I'm just further defining all the moth-eaten holes within the robes themselves. Now you can add white scar instead if you want a brighter tone, but I found padded witch flesh was bright enough for me and didn't end up overpowering the look of the model. Finally, a glaze using some heavily diluted BL tan greens being applied to tie the layers together, but also just to reinforce that ghostly green look. The cloth around his forearms and the scabbard I'm painting in now with a 1-to-1 mix of Eshin Grey and Abaddon Black. A layer is then given to these areas using pure Eshin Grey. Followed by a quick highlight using Dawnstone. All the belts and straps around the arms I'm carefully picking out with drier bark. Then giving a targeted highlight using Baneblade Brown. Finally, the belt buckle and end of the scabbard shaft I'm picking out with Iron Warriors. Those beautiful turquoise tones complementing that beaten, oxidized armour, all tied together alongside the pale, pallid flesh of a malevolent, ruthless spirit hell-bent on causing havoc amongst the folks of the Northern Kingdom. Oof! Sending chills down my spine already. My Shadow of Rhudar was based using my snow basing method, which can be found in my 5-minute bases playlist. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you all enjoyed today's video. It's nice to get some of the Angmar stuff on the channel finally. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell for video upload notifications. And until next time guys, take care and as always, happy hobbying. Bye guys.